Okay.
Do you hear us?
So we have a class today. It's called Hanukkah in 5D. In order to understand Hanukkah in 5D, we need to understand Hanukkah in 1D first, in 2D, and in 3D at least, to review a little bit what's going on with Hanukkah. It's going to be a two-part class, so it's a series of 2 parts. So today we're going to get to one specific part. Next week is going to be very crazy. I tell you already that. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be a lot of stuff that probably, I don't know how many of you were exposed to when we talk about Hanukkah. But today I'm going to play easy as much as possible about when we talk about Hanukkah in 5D. So we're going to get started. Let me just put here. I'm going to pin myself. So the video. There you go. Good. Okay. So 5D is better reception. Absolutely. It's not 5G, but 5D. We'll talk about that as well.
Gaston, do you hear me?
So this is Hanukkah in 5D. How many of you know what I have on this side over here? It says Hanukkah in 5D. It says Cantor Gastón Bogomolni. You have a beautiful Hanukkah with candles. And then we also have a symbol. Have you ever seen that symbol before? You've seen it. You know what it is?
No.
It's the 10 spheres. Okay. Now, what are the 10 spheres? Or the 10 spherot, or the 10 emanations, what's they called? We're going to talk about that as well. Now, and then we're going to talk about that a little bit next week, because it's going to be a little more of that. But that comes from the Kabbalah, right? Kabbalah is Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah means to receive, like Kabbalat Shabbat, to receive the Shabbat. And Kabbalah has great ideas, great school of thoughts. There are more than 300 branches of Kabbalah. There's no one. So because like the Hasidim, it started with one master, and then each person followed the rabbis. Here too. Why? Because Kabbalah means to receive. So each of these people received information, right? Or the soul came already with some information that they need to reveal. And each of them had a different part of secrets or things, or reveals things that they were not revealed before. And one came to Moshe, and then one came to Neil, and another came to me, right? So each of us just explore what it came to us, and it's just different, So there are things that they are similar, but things that are different. These specific symbols per se, that is called 10 emanations, right? And the only thing I can tell you from this symbol is that on the top, where it says Keter, right? The top of the top sphirot or emanations is called Keter. Keter means crown, right? Corona, it's crown. And that represents, in a way, God or the heavens, right? The infinite, the Ein Sof, as it's called, the infinite. And the one Malchut over there, which is the lowest, right? Malchut means kingdom, is really this world. It's the world of the physical world, the one that we can touch. This is Malchut, right? And God is there. So between God and Malchut, there's a lot of routes, and there's a lot of channels that we can travel through and understand. Some you can travel through meditations, some you can travel through dreams. There's a lot of different ways how the Kabbalists explain how this can be explored in one way or another. Okay, then we'll talk a little bit because it will have to be a whole introduction of what each of them represent and what it is. In a way, just for you to understand a little bit, from Keter, right, from this crown over there, God over there, let's say that God sends information, right, sends a light. Now, each of the other circles that you see there, the other emanations, are manifestations of God. Manifestations through loving kindness, manifestations through discipline and strictness, manifestations through different character traits of God, right? Of course, it's metamorphosis, but it's kind to understand. For example, I get 500 volts, of light, and all of a sudden, when it comes to me, it becomes very dimmed. So I don't get the 500, and I don't get burned, and I don't get electrified. So I need all the other filters, in a way, in order for me to get something that I can understand without burning myself. You know, get a little bit idea? It's not easy, but I'm just was giving you an idea. So that's one thing we'll explore. And we will be exploring this in many of my classes because some of the Kabbalists, they have been trying to explain many holidays and also many things in our lives through this system. They call this a technology. It's an old technology. It's not like the computers and the devices we carry today, but they call that a technology that can allow you to achieve certain things by just knowing how it works. Okay, like any other technology, you can achieve things with the phone, or you can really get upset, or you can actually get very frustrated, right? Like any device that you don't know how it works. This might be the same thing, but if you know how it works, it might actually be very good for us. Now, let's review a little bit about Hanukkah, because I know that Hanukkah means a lot of different things for different people. So I think I love this graphic. Actually, I love it. And I think it's a good brainstorm type of Hanukkah. So what do we get? We have Hanukkah in the center, right? And then on one side, we have the story. On another side, we have Hanukkah, which is the menorah, the Hanukkah menorah. And also we have celebrations. From that, we get different branches. So let's go into the story one, right? From the story, we get that there is a miracle. Anyone remember what the miracle is? You say about the menorah, the oil that lasted 8 days. Okay, the menorah lasted 8 days. Any other miracle that we might remember about? Yes. They won the battle, the few against the many, right? This big empire, but there were a few, soldiers, let's all, or warriors. Any other miracle? Okay. So the jar of oil that was hidden somewhere, so that's a miracle that they found it, right? Good. Now, that's one part of the story. Another part of the story, we have this king called Antiochus. Antiochus IV, or Antiochus Epiphanes, right, as he's called. He comes from the descendants of Alexander Magno, the Great, Alexander the Great. They were already conquering so many, you know a little of the story, you have the Romans, the Romans, and you have the Greeks. At that moment, they were like conquering so many different places. They were a big empire, and all of a sudden, Antiochus gets over and he starts conquering Egypt and all different the Middle West side. He get a battle, and he wants to get everyone start to really worshiping to his idols. He brings Hellenism, right? Remember that they were, they were Greeks, but the Greeks, what they wanted to do was a little bit what happened with America, right? All the time you go to Europe, you go to the Republic, you have McDonald's, right? Right? You have Starbucks everywhere. It doesn't matter where. Even in the airport of Madrid, I was in Spain, I got Starbucks and I got a Burger King, So a little bit of what happened with the Greeks was that, they were trying to influence the world with what they thought it was good for the world and for people. And it was very attractive, believe me, it was very, very attractive. So that was very, very important. Now, so we know that part. Then there's a battle because some people didn't like it. And then there is religious freedom. Now, we have the Maccabees, right? Who are these warriors, the rebels, and whose father of the Maccabees, so they were called the Hashmonaim, or the Hashmonaim. They were a group of priests, of high priests. There were many high priests at the moment. The Hashmonaim were one of them. They lived in the mountains of Modin. If you go to Israel, it's very close to Jerusalem. They were really close to Modin, and but there were very, very few of them, and they really were warriors. They were, people of, praying, and they were priests. Okay, that's what they did for a living. They were not like going, to the war. And then we have Judah Maccabee, which was one of the 5 kids. There were not only one, but Mattathias, the high priest, had 5 kids, and the third one was Judah. And Judah was the only one that was called the Maccabee. The rest were not called Maccabees. He was the only one who was called Judah the Maccabee. Now we have this part of the story, the 8 days that Saul just mentioned. right? And there's something here of Sukkot, and we're going to talk about that. And then the miracle of oil. That's the story. And we'll talk a little more about that, but that's kind of like a little bit of the story, right? One thing I want to add to the story, which is very important, is that the reality of what happened in Hanukkah, it was not really Mattathias and his sons against the Greeks. It was really a civil war. Why? Because the original part of the story starts Mattathias killing another Jew. And I'll tell you how we know about this, okay? And that's how it started, because many Jews were mesmerized by what was offered by the Greeks. They were totally mesmerized, and they loved it. They really loved it. And a lot of people started to follow that. A lot of people stopped doing circumcisions. They stopped getting, following the holidays and keeping Shabbat. They just thought that the Greek idea was great. The gymnasiums were like, wait, this is the way to go. Girls and muscles and sports, right? Nothing different than we live today sometimes, right? When we talk about, assimilation. So Mattathias was a little bit of a Pinchas. I don't know if you remember the story of Pinchas and this mention in the story about Pinchas, our ancestor. You have to be a zealot, like you need to really go and fight for what God said is good. So that's how it started the story. It started as a civil war, trying to make people realize, what are you doing? You're killing Judaism. And they started to have kids, and they started to name them John and Jonathan, and different names, like Kokopoulos and different names, that are Greek. And that's how the story started. There was a whole story of assimilation, a group who couldn't stand it, and the civil war started, right? This is one of the reasons also that the story of Hanukkah is not in the Torah. We'll talk about this. So Hanukkah, what we have oil, we have candles, we have light, fire, safety, we have blessings, 8 days, counting, the shamash, right, that we call the helper. And then we have the celebration, which is mixed with that, with latkes, with the oil, with sufganiot, chocolate gifts, the coins and the geld. And then we have, it's winter, for at least in this hemisphere, it's winter. We have snow, light in darkness, which is part of the light. We have celebration, we play the dreidel. You like to play the dreidel, Moshe? Okay, play the dreidel. We spin like a dreidel. We have letters, Hebrew letters, movement, song, dance, and all what we know about Hanukkah, right? Good. Now, I said before that Hanukkah is not in the Hanukkah is not in the Tanakh. Everyone knows what the Tanakh is. The Tanakh is Torah, Nevi'im, which is the book of the prophets. That's where we read the Haftarahs from most of the time. And then we have Ketuvim. And just for anyone who might actually be a little lost, that's what I meant when I said that. Torah encompasses Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That's what we have in the Torah, in the scroll. Nevi'im encompasses the first books, Joshua, Judges, Samuel 1, Samuel 2, Kings 1, Kings 2, then the major prophets, and then there are 12 prophets more. And the Ketuvim has Psalms, Proverbs, Job, then the 5 Megillot, the book of Ruth, the book of Esther, Lamentations that we read for Tisha B'Av, Ecclesiastes, which is Kohelet that we read on Shmini Atzeret, and Esther we read on Purim. And then we have the book of Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles. That's it. That's the Tanakh. That's what we call the Old Testament. There's no Hanukkah there. There's no book of Maccabees. Nothing. So the question is, where is this book? And how do we know the story from? And here we go. So the book comes from these books called the Apocrypha, right? It's called the non-canonicals. You know what non-canonicals mean? That they didn't make the canon. They didn't make the edition. They didn't make it on time, or the rabbis decided not to put it there for a reason. Not only the book of Maccabees, you can see there, circle as the book of Maccabees number 1 and number 2. Have you ever read the book of Maccabees? Okay, good news. You go to Google, you put book of Maccabees, and it's online. And you'll be surprised what you read there. We're going to mention and cite some little things about this book today. But you see there are other books as well. So how do we know about these books? We don't know from the rabbis from Babylon. We don't know from the rabbis who developed the Talmud, the the Babylon Talmudic. We know it from actually from Jews who were in Jerusalem, who stayed in Jerusalem, and those many other communities like the Yemenites or the Ethiopians who actually were around more Jerusalem, or they got the story from Jerusalem. But this book did not make the Old Testament, did not make the Tanakh. Okay, so that's where the book of Maccabees is from. Now, there you go. You see the second book of the Maccabees. So there are books that you can find if you buy, for example, a Bible called Old Jerusalem or called the Jerusalem Bible. You get these books there. You'll get these books. Okay. Now there is another book because it cannot be different. It's also Megillah. It's called Megillat Antiochus, or the book of the Hashmonaim. So they wrote this originally, apparently in Aramaic or Hebrew, but we got already the version in Greek. Okay, when we got the version, we didn't get the original version. We got the version in Greek. So that's what it says. Anyone would like to read? Can you see? It's hard to read? Okay. So as you see, there is a scroll called Megillat, and Megillat Hanukkah, Megillat Antiochus, or Book of Hashmonaim, that some Jews in the world, they read it as a Megillah. Okay, so we didn't get that tradition. Now, anyone familiar with zodiac? How many of you like the zodiac and read like what sign are you? You're Virgo. What sign are you? Gemini. That's okay. You can think about it. Neil, what sign? You're Virgo? How many? 3 Virgos here? Sagittarian. You are in the right place right now. Very good. Tisha? Scorpion? Juan? Libra? I'm Cancer. You're Scorpion too? Okay, I'm sure that you have a lot of different okay. Yeah, I'm sure that you have a lot of different signs there. Now, why did I bring this? And this is a little bit of the story as well. And I circled 2 of them. One is Pisces, because during Pisces time, or the moon of Pisces, let me tell you something, we count the moon, right? We do Rosh Chodesh. What is Rosh Chodesh? Counting the moon, because our calendar is throughout the 365 days of the solar calendar. We have lunar, right? We go the calendar by the month of the moon. That's why, especially the Orthodox people know very well when to have kids, or not, because we go through also the period of administration of the women. So now Purim comes into Pisces, and then Hanukkah in Sagittarius. Now, do you know, those who know a lot about astrology, which planet influence these 2 signs? It happens to be the same one. Ta-da-da-da. Jupiter. Okay. Jupiter is a huge, or the largest of the planets as we know them, right? Jupiter is the biggest one. So we're not going to talk so much about Jupiter today. Next week, we might answer some questions about Jupiter and why is the influence. Now, this is very interesting. So Hanukkah and Purim, that had something in similarity, right? And we're going to see what is similar in between Hanukkah and Purim in the story and other things. They are influenced by the same planet, okay? And this was important for many rabbis who really followed astrology. So Judaism and astrology, right? There's a lot of questions, like, makes no sense, right? Some people say, what's going on here? And yes. So let me tell you and bring you something very interesting that comes from Philo. Philo was a philosopher from 2,000 years ago almost, okay? And this is what he said. The menorah was also a model of the solar system. So I'm not the only one who talked about this. The Kabbalists are not the only one who talk about astrology. This comes already from so long ago that the rabbis and the Jewish philosophers are playing around. That's all they knew. You know who was the first astronomist and astrologist in our history? In all Jewish history? Yes, you know. It's just that you don't remember. Abraham. What is the first thing that God said to Abraham? Look at the sky. And when he looked at the sky, you know, he said, so count the stars, and your descendants are going to be as many of those stars. So when he looked at the stars, the rabbis identified this, that this guy understood the sky. He knew really what was going on there. He knew about the constellations, he knew about the galaxies and everything. So it was not new. So we already had one. And it's written somewhere that he wrote a book called Yetzirah, the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formations. One day we're going to study about that book. It's only 3 pages, but a lot of commentary, right? But it's all about this idea that Judaism has something to do with the planets, with the galaxies, with the stars and everything, right? They knew everything. They knew calendar before there was Google and Apple, right? They really knew. So what it says here, the Rema was following a long tradition of ascribing allegorical meaning to the temple and its various contents. Perhaps the earliest to do was Philo of Alexandria. Alexandria was in Egypt, a Jewish biblical commentator who lived in the 1st century. He wrote of the allegorical meaning of the menorah, the 7-branched candelabrum that was placed in the tabernacle and later in the temple in Jerusalem, which is the one they profaned, right? The Greeks. So he writes the following, and we cite, from this candlestick, there proceeded 6 branches, 3 on each side, projecting from the candlestick in the center, so as altogether to complete the number of 7. And in all the 7 there were 7 candles and 7 lights, being symbols of those 7 stars, which are called planets. I'm going to stop there. At that moment, they knew about 7 planets only. You know, they didn't have telescopes or anything, but they knew about the planets 2,000 years ago. Now we need big telescope in order to try to discover something. It's amazing. So here is the menorah. I don't know if you can really see because it's the only picture I was able to find, but on the top it says Moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun is in the middle. It's kind of like the shamash, right? In the middle branch. Then Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. This symbol is as old as 2,000 years old. Okay? So I'm not bringing anything new. I'm not cuckoo. I'm not Mishiga. I mean, it really comes from our own, rabbis and philosophers. So Purim and Hanukkah. Sorry, I want to get rid of that. I'll do that. It disappeared. So they're not in the Torah, right? They don't come, the stories don't come from the Torah specifically. One comes from the Tanakh, which is Purim, Esther, but Hanukkah doesn't. They initiate also from an action of a small group of people and not from Hashem. Even in the Purim story in Esther, Hashem is not, God is not mentioned once, right? It might be implicit, but it's not mentioned, right? Influenced by Jupiter or from Jupiter. They talk about the Messiah's time in a way, right? They say that when the Messiah's time will come, Purim will be the only holiday that we'll still keep celebrating, but no other festivals. Al-Anisim, in the liturgy, in the Siddur, we really talk about Al-Anisim. What is Al-Anisim? Right? For the miracles. And then, I don't know if you knew, but in Chicago, since the 20s already, scholars have been doing what is called the Latket Hamantashen debate. The Latkes Hamantashen debate. There are scholars who come and trying to convince you that Latkes is better than Hamantashen, and the other one, the Hamantashen is better than Latkes. And there's even a song that I cannot really play today, but I will send it to you because it doesn't work the sound. But it's a funny song. And if you don't know, go to YouTube, put the Latke Hamantashen debate, and you might mesmerize yourself and get really astonished about the discussions they have. They really come with essays, real essays, like like PhDs, in trying to convince you why one is better than the other one. It's so interesting. Now, Hanukkah is not different, that it comes in a time, and this is mentioned in the story in the book of Maccabees, that it it really started, they do the profanation of the temple on the winter solstice. Usually it's around December 21st, and they also mentioned the 25th. At the 25th of every month, they used to do something that was worshiping idolatry, and it was a pagan holiday. So it's not coincidence that actually they chose also the 25th, and we'll see actually the number 25 becomes a very prominent number, and we will see that next week. Next week, we're going to talk about a lot of numbers, the numbers of candles, the numbers of 25, a lot of things. So, and we know very well that the winter solstice is the shortest day or the shortest night in the year, and there's no coincidence that then Christmas later on came as to be December 25th as well, which is also part of the winter solstice. Now, this is from the book of the Maccabees. It says the following: then they were joined by a group of Hasidians. So the word Hasidic, that is not as new as 1700s, right? It comes from before. It says we were joined. Who were joined? The Maccabees. They were joined by a group of Hasidians, mighty warriors of Israel, all of them devoted to the law. And all of those who were fleeing from the persecutions joined them and supported them. So there's a group of people in the book of Maccabees. This is not mentioned in the story for kids. This is not the story we hear every day. When we look at the stories, we don't hear the story because we barely read the book of Maccabees. And that's the book that we should be reading to really know about the story of Hanukkah, right? Because it's full of different stories, but except for this. So these are called the Hasidim Rishonim. Rishonim means the first Hasidim. Apparently, according to the anthropologists and the historians, they discovered that this group was kind of the first group that was doing just spiritual work, right? Like, for example, you go to Tzfat in Israel and they say all these Kabbalists, are really praying and doing the spiritual work while the soldiers go to the war. Apparently, this is what happened there. The Maccabees were going to the battles, right? The Maccabees were really going to battle, but they had these Hasidim Rishonim who knew how to connect with the heavens, how to connect with God. They knew the spiritual side of it. Remember, in the Torah already happens. Sometimes we have Moshe, lifting his hands. It's like he really connecting, and when he lowered the hands, they lose the battle. He raised the hand, they're getting right. So there is some connection that has to do with spirituality and action. The one cannot be with the other. So the Maccabees are the physical fight, and the Hasidim, Rishonim, who then end up being the Pharisees, which is our rabbis in a way, right? This is a group of 2,000 years ago that happens to be, where we descend. Our Judaism comes from the Pharisees. They are the spiritual fight. So the physical fight and the spiritual fight. Remember about that. It's so important. The physical fight and the spiritual fight. So what they're trying to say here is that one needs the other in order to really win the battle. The action plus spirituality connection. It's like the body and soul. We have a body and we have a soul. The soul does the connection, the spiritual connection, and the body does all the other things, action and spiritual connection. So what's the miracle? The few against the many, as one of the miracles, as Moshe said. Now, something about the Hasidim that is mentioned, they had no fear. They say with fear, we cannot win anything. So they had no fear. So they teaches us, they're already teaching us something, that we don't have to have fear when we go into a battle, any battle, maybe spiritual battle, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to go and fight with someone physically. But when you go for something, what they're trying to teach you is that fear is your worst enemy. Doubt is your worst enemy. And they were also having a concept that is very famous called Mesirat Nefesh, which is they're willing to give their lives in the name of God, right? To be martyrs. Good. It's time for another song, and then we'll continue. Just good. Songs is good. I will wake you up. Don't worry. We'll move you around to wake you up. There you go. Okay. There you go. Maybe you know the song. There you go. Oh Hanukkah, come light the Menorah. Let's have a party, we all dance the hora. Gather round the table, we give you a treat. Say we want to play and latkes to eat. And while we are burning, Hanukkah is to go. One for each night, they share the sweet light to remind us of days gonna go. One for each night, they share the sweet light to remind us of days long ago. Oh Hanukkah, hayom tevashenen, alustik nifeinen, veilech min. Sie sind glad gesehen mit Schien bis Binge. Please really ho. Ala nisim ve ala niflahot asher kolelu Maccabim. Ala nisim ve ala niflahot asher kolelu Maccabim. Awake? Good. Now, miracle. You talk about the jar, you talk about the olive oil, you talk about the oil lasted 8 days. Now, the question is, you had a point, Neil. You say, the miracle also is that they found the jar, but even one step even farther is the miracle is also that one person had the faith that someone was going to find it. So the person who hid it has a lot of merit, it has a lot of zchut, right? He had the trust that actually one day this was going to be over. So he hid it. He hid one jar. And yes, the other miracle is that someone found it. But I give a lot of credit. It's always the same thing. In any movie that you see, in any organization, you see most of the time the people who are behind the scenes are the people who work harder and are the people who really have the merit. This is a guy who nobody knew probably, and he was able to hide a jar of oil, thinking that this, or trusting and having faith that this was going to be over one day. Now, why 8 days? Everyone says because he needed 8 days for the oil go. So yes, they needed 4 days inbound and 4 days outbound, and also the people who did the oil was the tribe of Asher. It was one specific tribe. So, but the other question is, halachically, it didn't say that it has to be olive oil. So they could use another type of oil. What? They had a lot of olive trees, but at the point, if I have palm trees all the time, I have other type of oil and I need to really, be sure that I can light this, I will use wherever it is. I mean, they're coming from a war. At this point is wherever you have. If you have a cup of soup, I eat that soup, whatever it is to survive. So they could have used another one, but they didn't. They ended up actually using olive oil. And that was also part of the miracle, that because they used it was legitimately holy, and it has to do a lot with what the Torah talks about when it talks about olive oil. Not only they have a lot of olive, but also the extra virgin olive oil was considered something that was connected also with Messiah, and it was connected also with kings, and it was also connected with the high priest as they were welcoming to the community, and they were going to be installed in a way, right? I don't know why I can't see that thing, but it says something. Okay, it says more to come. Okay, good. Now, what is the real story here? Why is Hanukkah related to Sukkot? Anyone knows? Okay. Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. They are both 8 days. Yes. Good. It says Marcy Adler. Do you know her? Yeah, she says they couldn't observe Sukkot during the war. Marcy is correct. They couldn't observe. They were during the war. The temple was profanated. The temple was taken, so they couldn't really go to the temple to celebrate Sukkot. And now it's written in the story. And now I'm going to go into the story. Let's see if everyone can see what I see, because I might have to change my share screen now. It's here. Good. So here you have Hanukkah, Book of the Maccabees versus Talmud Mishnah. This is something we'll study in another time, because there are contradictions also between what the Talmudic rabbi said, and there is contradictions what Rambam, what Maimonides says about the story, and there's contradictions what the real Book of Maccabees says, and even what Josephus, Flavio Josephus, who was another historian in the time, said. So let's go into what it says here in the Book of the Maccabees. Okay. So they also rebuilt the sanctuary. Let's say here, yeah, here, the Book of the Maccabees. They also rebuilt the sanctuary and the interior of the temple, right? Now they recover it. They're going to do a re-inauguration and consecrated the courts. They made new holy vessels and brought the lampstand, the altar of incense, and the table into the temple. Then they offer incense on the altar and lit the lamps on the lampstand, and this gave light in the temple. They placed the bread on the table and hung up the curtains, right, the parochets. Thus, they finished all the work they had undertaken. Early in the morning, on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is 25th of Kislev, and it says there, the month of Kislev, is the 148 years. They rose and offered sacrifice as the law directs, and the new altar of burnt offerings that they had built, because everything was destroyed. They had to rebuild everything. At the very season, on the very day that the Gentiles had profaned it, it was dedicated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals. So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and joyfully offered burnt offerings. They offered a sacrifice of well-being and a thanksgiving offering. Okay, and then it says, now Maccabees, which is Judah, and his followers, the Lord leading them on, recovered the temple and the city. They tore down the altars that had been built in the public squares, so they rebuilt the whole city. They purified the sanctuary and made another altar of sacrifice. Then, striking fire out of flint, they offered sacrifices after a lapse of 2 years, and they offered incense and etc., etc. It happened that on the same day on which the sanctuary had been profaned by the foreigners, the purification of the sanctuary took place. That is, on the 25th day of the same month, which was Kislev. They celebrated for 8 days with rejoicing in the manner of the festival of Sukkot, the festival of booths, remembering how not long before, during the festival of booths, they had been wandering in the mountains and caves like wild animals. Therefore, carrying, etc., etc. That's how it comes to be that we are celebrating, and it has a connection with Sukkot. So if you really think about the last holiday we had was Sukkot, right? Because after the Sukkot until Hanukkah, we really have no Jewish holidays. So not only the Maccabees, were able to connect now the holidays, but nowadays there's a lot of people who during Sukkot and in the Sukkah, as they invite the Ushpizin, they invite the guests, that come into the Sukkah, the patriarchs, as we invite them. Sometimes, for example, there are people who reserve some wine and they put it for the 8 days of Sukkot. They leave it in the Sukkah for people who want to get married. And they want to get married maybe in Hanukkah, so they use it because they think that the Sukkah will have some relationship also with Hanukkah, and it does have a relationship somehow, as you see it right now. Also, it's the festival of Thanksgiving, so this can't be different as we really go into Hanukkah. So it's very interesting how we can connect all the different holidays, and they are in fact very, very well connected. It's just that we need to look very well into, with loop of what we have. Let me go back to where it is. The connection that Sukkot has is that, first of all, it has 8 days, as Hanukkah had, And that's the reason it's interesting, because we think 8 days sometimes because of the candles or the oil that has to be made. But also in the story already read from the book of Maccabees, from the original text, it says that actually they celebrated 8 days, not because of the oil. They celebrated 8 days because they couldn't celebrate Sukkot. They couldn't celebrate Sukkot because they were hiding. They were hiding, and the temple was not available, right? So in a way, we could tell also that that Hanukkah lasts 8 days because they celebrated Sukkot instead, right? So Hanukkah didn't exist then. Hanukkah was something that came after to celebrate Hanukkah. Well, at that day, they were celebrating Sukkot in the temple that was reinaugurated, and it was reinstalled. There was no Hanukkah then. There was no Hanukkah. There was only the 7 branches. Everything else that we know as Hanukkah developed afterwards. So that's the connection with Sukkot. That started later on with the rabbis. But funny enough, if you see in this picture that I found, you see it has a Hanukkah. It's funky because usually we'll have like a 7 branches, candelabrum. But all of a sudden I found this picture that is so cute, but it has a Hanukkah inside of the sukkah. So I was like, wow, I need to use this picture instead of on any other thing that I find, because I found that it was very cute, that it had a connection. I don't think they realized. I don't think they did it on purpose. I think that they just used this as a drawing, and they thought probably Hanukkah will be, something very cute to have. So let me go back to the Zoom people so I can share screen. Okay. Good. Okay. So that's one of the connections with Sukkot. There are other ones as well, but today we're just going to live with this one because it's the basics of why it has a connection. Sukkot was celebrated that day in the temple to reinaugurate, to do the gala. They did Sukkot because they couldn't celebrate before. Now the question is, what is the miracle? What is the real miracle? So those that we don't really see, that's what some rabbis would say. What are the real miracles? Because we are looking for big miracles, but the miracles usually are those that we don't see. What does it mean? The ones that we don't see. So things that happen in spite of what we think we see or think it is happening, right? Sometimes we think that we are living this story and we are going through this reality that we perceive as to be our reality. But the miracles are really happening behind the scenes and we don't even realize. So sometimes the miracles, right? When you say, oh, wow, this happened for a reason, right? And that's the miracle. Not what you saw, what you thought, and when you got upset and you got mad or angry or whatever for the situation, but the miracle is what was happening behind the scenes, what you were thinking that things were really wrong. And then afterwards, it's even more miracle when you realize what you have lost or what you haven't sinned. You got it? I lost you? You got it. Okay. I'm sure you have plenty of of examples in your life. When you're living something, you think this is crap, everything is wrong. Behind the scenes, everything is the miracle happening, and you don't realize because you are very much into horse focus. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks later, or a month after, or maybe a year after, you say, oh my God. And I didn't see it, right? That's the miracle. So having perspective is a miracle. Not having veils, right? Layers that don't allow us to have perspective, to really see beyond, to have like what is called balcony sight, right? When you, instead of being seen here, you can be in the balcony in the 8th floor and you can see the whole thing like a drone. You can really see the whole picture, being conscious. That's what people call in Judaism is called being conscious. So here's the true mitzvah, right? Light the candles. Is that the true mitzvah? Is that what we are supposed to do on Hanukkah? Yes, it's one of the mitzvot. Being able to see the miracles is also part of a true mitzvah. That candles are lit all year round, not just on Hanukkah. We can wake up and help change the world. That's a miracle. That's a true mitzvah. That every time that we wake up, we have a mission, that we have a purpose, not only to light our own candle, but also to light the candles for someone else. In Judaism, we always say to be or lagoim, right? The Jewish people are or, they're light to the world. That the Torah is light to the people. So in essence, one of the true mitzvahs is really to be or for others, to be light for others. And it says here, be the light that helps others see. Any questions? Any questions until here? Did you learn anything new? Yes. Who designed the menorah, the original menorah? The one for Hanukkah, I don't know exactly who designed it like the first time. I don't think that they have like a copyright that I know of. I'm sure that the rabbis came up with the idea, you know, later on, I would say even 200 years later or 300 years later, to come up with the, with the idea of bringing Hanukkah into place as to be a festival to be celebrated. As you see even later, you know, in some of the writings, Maimonides, who was already in the 1100s, had a perspective that was different than the Talmudic rabbis who were in the 200s, 300s. And, but I don't know exactly who really designed it, but someone with the good sechel has to be probably a Jewish guy, you know, who designed it, you know, who said, now let's put 8 branches instead of 7, so we can celebrate Hanukkah. I have a question, a few questions here from the, let me stop sharing. How would I do this? 1 second. Stop share. Let's see. Okay, going to the Zoom. I have some questions here. Susan has a question. Judy Markovich has a question. Yes, we learned quite a lot. Thank you very much. Yes, learned a lot. Tara, thank you so much. This was quite, I tried to be very, I mean, I know there was some new material here. Next week, we are going to go really more profound and really bring a coffee if you tend to fall asleep or anything, because it's going to be a lot new and very nice. If you like math and you like to play with numbers, we're going to play also with some gematria, which is, gematria is how the Kabbalists used to play around when they were awake. They were, yes, which is, gematria is numerology. They like it's Jewish numerology, and they play around with the words in Hebrew. Since the Hebrew words have values, each of them, you can do math a lot, and you can actually compare words with words, and you'll be amazed by the amount of things that they found. Sure. Okay, Kabbalah is not something I relate to. It's just Kabbalah is a different point of view. It's the mystical point of view of anything that has to do with Jewish life. So it's not that I'm relating this, because most of the time, I'll tell you something about, that's a very good question. I grew up in a Jewish household, you know, with regular conservative Judaism, you know, traditional family, etc. And I grew up, and I'm a clergy, and I studied, you know, to be a clergy, and I started to be a cantor, you know, studied 5 years of rabbinical school, and we barely were told. Just, it's almost like all the stories and everything were looked into the point of view of historically, maybe religious, and maybe ritualistically, but they were missing something. I was like, okay, is this everything we have here? Right? It's almost like, is that all? Like history, whatever is written there. I mean, give me something else, you know, that can feed my soul, because this is all intellectual, but then it's not giving me nothing. You know, I have a soul too, and I need to be fed. I'm not fed by history. I'm not fed by just, you know, on the ritual side of it. Yes, a little bit, but give me something that can bring me more spirituality, that can make me a better person. Bring me something that I can aspire to more, right? I want to know more. I want secrets. I want, you know, something, you know, so give me some, you know, some spicy stuff. And Kabbalah has a lot of, and Hasidut too, you know, Hasidic teachings, which is a lot of Kabbalah as well. Just, it has a lot of spice. And it has a lot of point of views that allows me at least to see things in a different way and allows me to connect more, at least me, myself. The other people who don't connect, they're very intellectual and they're very logic and might not being able to cut through or break through, you know, to get to the Kabbalah. Yeah. No, I wouldn't say most Jews don't. Neil is saying that it's kind of like people tend to be more skeptical and it's difficult to believe. I'm saying to this too, repeating. It's difficult to believe, you know, like the spiritual side. Spiritual side is almost like I say, you tell me I have a stomachache and I say, no, you don't. I say, I tell you I have a stomachache and I say, no, you don't. You're a pediatrician, so you have this all the time, right? And the pediatrician can go to the little kid and say, no, you don't have a headache. And the kid can tell to the pediatrician, how do you know? It's my head and I have a headache. You know, what can you tell me? You can go and test me everywhere. I have a headache. I tell you I have a headache, right? So the spirituality of the, you know, of each individual, of each person is the same thing. I can feel actually I connected to the divine and I connected with an angel and you can tell me nothing because whether you believe or you're skeptical or not, I felt it. And I can tell you, or I have a dream that it looks so real, you know, that it's amazing. And that's kind of like, you know, spirituality is about. I cannot say that you are more spiritual than myself, or I'm more spiritual than than yourself, because it comes so deep in ourselves. The connection with the soul is so real in a way that it's just unique in each of us. I can tell you something. You can tell when you're connected with someone else and it's not intellectually. You can be in silence. You might know even the language of the other person, but you can look in the eyes and you can actually cry. And why you're crying, or you're connecting, or you all of a sudden you feel that person, you cannot explain it, right? Because I'm not talking to them. I'm not having a conversation. I don't even know their language. The person might be totally different age. We might have totally different experiences. But regardless of that, I can look at the eyes and connect. And that's something that we cannot explain. That's what Kabbalah gives me. And when I discover, you know, the world of Kabbalah and Hasidut, which was like 10 years ago, for me was a huge discovery. And that's why I like to teach it, because I had the grounds, you know, very well grounded in everything that I was taught in the regular traditional Judaism. And now I'm going to a different realm, which is kind of like elevating a little bit everything that I have to a 5D, right? You asked me why it's 5D. This is 3D and this is 5D. It's elevating a little bit and having more angles and more perspective of something that you know, there are many rabbis, you know, who might talk to you about the Torah not being from this world, that Moshe was not from this world, from the earth, you know, that he came from another galaxy. And it's not new. I heard this from so many people, right? And, you know, these prophets, you know, who had these connections that were amazing. And the Torah that is not specifically something was revealed in this 3D that came from another planet. Who knows, right? I mean, there's so many things we don't know yet. So yes, we can be skeptical, or we can open our hearts to say, you know what, maybe some of this works for me, right? But I cannot tell for anyone. I cannot obligate. You know, it's just, you have to find it. That's why Kabbalah, I said at the beginning, means to receive. If you receive it, it's yours. If you don't receive it yet, it's not that you study. You don't study Kabbalah, you receive. So I can tell you about things. I can tell you what other rabbis have said. And if you got it, you say, you know what he said about this? It's just something resonated in me. That's all about. I'm just opening a new window because you never know. And that might make you, you know, wake up of something. Might have you like, whoa, that's a spark. I love it. I never thought about that. Wow, I felt it, right? That's all about. And next week, we're going to go a little more profound on that. And it's 4:05. I like to keep my classes, you know, like an hour 5. I'm going to finish with the song. Everyone will, yes, of course. The astrological with the Jewish calendar? Yes, a lot. Actually, there are many books about Judaism and astrology. And every time that you have Rosh Chodesh, and hopefully I'm going to start doing it, there's a reason also that women love Rosh Chodesh, and the book clubs are around Rosh Chodesh and the meetings of Rosh Chodesh, especially with the women, because it relates with the moon, and the moon relates with the period of menstruation. And so it's kind of like the natural science, of the women, right? To really connect with the moon. So on Rosh Chodesh, we're going to start really studying a little bit about Rosh Chodesh and a little bit of astrology, what really the Jewish side of astrology has to say about the new moon and the energy that is in that month, right? It's not just that astrology is talking about, well, if you are in Pisces or you are a Gemini, etc. No, Jewish people had a lot to say about that. And Abraham, who was the first astrologist, in the book of Yetzirah, I just mentioned before, the book of formation, he has actually letters, Hebrew letters. That's how actually he designs how the 22 Hebrew letters are born, and the vibration of each of these letters has. So yes, little by little we'll investigate a little more of that. And now I'm going to teach a song that is in English. It's about Hanukkah. It's about latkes. And we'll finish with this, and we'll see you next week at 3 p.m. Hopefully you all join, because you don't want to miss actually these amazing secrets, and also giving you some intentions for when you light the candles of Hanukkah. Things that you might haven't heard before, but might help you to make your celebration more meaningful. That's the whole idea. So the song goes like this. I like to eat potato latkes. I like to eat them all day. And when I eat potato latkes, this is what I say. You know what I say? You're a little potato, you're a little potato, you're a little potato, latkes to me. You're a little potato, you're a little potato, you're a little potato. I like to eat them with sour cream. I like to eat them all day. And when I eat with sour cream, this is what I say. You already know, so let's sing together. You're a little potato, you're a little potato, you're a little potato, latkes to me. You're a little potato, you're a little potato, you're a little potato. I like to eat them with apple sauce. I like to eat them all day. And when I eat them with apple sauce, this is what I say. What do we say? You're to me. Potato. And I had a student who say, I like to eat them with dulce de leche. I like to, you know what dulce de leche is? It's caramel, I like to eat them all day. And when I eat with dulce de leche, this is what I say. One more time, then we go. You're a little potato. You're a little potato. You're a little potato. Like this. You're a little potato. You're a little potato. You're a little potato. Hanukkah Sameach, almost there. See you on Shabbat. And see you all next week. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.